I've lived in quiet neighborhoods before. The kind where people wave when you drive past. The kind where kids ride their bicycles until sunset and someone's sprinkler is always running somewhere. The kind where nothing really happens. That's exactly why I bought the house. After working in the city for almost 6 years, I wanted somewhere boring. Somewhere I could come home after work, close the garage, make dinner, and not hear traffic outside my bedroom window. The house wasn't anything special. 2 bedrooms upstairs, a small kitchen, a living room with a fireplace that I never used, and a narrow backyard surrounded by a wooden fence. The neighborhood itself was older, probably built sometime in the late 70s. Most of the houses looked almost identical. Same brick driveways, same small front lawns, same mailboxes near the sidewalk. There was only one house that looked completely different. It stood directly across the street from mine. It was a 2-story house with faded gray siding, broken shutters, and an overgrown lawn. The windows were covered from the inside, not boarded up, covered. Thick curtains hung behind every window on both floors. I'd noticed it the first time I came to see my house. I remember asking the realtor about it. She had looked across the street for a few seconds before answering. "Nobody lives there." That was all she said. I laughed. "I figured." She smiled awkwardly. "Yeah." I didn't think much about it. People leave houses empty for all kinds of reasons. Foreclosure, inheritance, legal problems. Sometimes they're just waiting to be sold. So when I moved in 3 weeks later, I completely forgot about it. At least, I thought I did. The first night in my new house was quiet. Too quiet, honestly. I spent most of the evening unpacking boxes. Around midnight, I finally went upstairs. I was standing in my bedroom window, looking for my phone charger, when I happened to glance outside. That's when I saw the house again. The entire property was dark, except for one window, the second-floor bedroom. There was a faint yellow light behind the curtains. I stared at it. Then I checked my phone. 12:07 a.m. I thought maybe someone had moved in. That would actually explain why the realtor had been so vague. I stood there for another few seconds. Then the light went out. I shrugged and went to bed. The next morning, I mentioned it to my neighbor. His name was Mike. He lived 3 houses down and had introduced himself while I was unloading boxes. I asked casually, "Did someone finally move into that house across from me?" Mike stopped drinking his coffee. "What house?" I pointed across the street. He looked, then looked back at me. "That one's empty. I saw a light upstairs last night." He stared at me for a moment, then laughed. Probably a car passing by. It was inside the bedroom. Mike didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "Nobody's lived there in 11 years. I smiled. 11? Yeah. What happened? Mike looked across the street again. "I don't know." His answer sounded strange. "You don't know?" "No." Then he changed the subject. At the time, I didn't push him. I wish I had, because that night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., someone knocked on my bedroom window. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. I woke up immediately. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. Then I heard it again. Knock. I sat up. My bedroom was completely dark. The curtains were closed. I listened. Nothing. I reached for my phone. 2:13 a.m. I turned on the flashlight. My first thought was that a branch had hit the window, but there were no trees near the house. Then I heard something outside. A woman's voice, very faint, almost a whisper. "Daniel." I froze. Nobody in the neighborhood knew my name yet. Not my neighbors. Not the realtor. Nobody. Then the voice came again. This time, from directly behind the window. "Daniel, turn the light on." I didn't move. I don't know why. Maybe because something about the voice felt wrong. Not threatening. Not angry. Just familiar. I slowly opened the curtains. There was nobody outside. Only the empty street. And the house across from mine. Its second-floor bedroom light was on. I stared at it. Then I noticed someone standing behind the curtain. A woman. She wasn't moving. She was simply standing there, watching my bedroom. I couldn't see her face, but I could tell she was looking directly at me. Then she slowly raised one hand and waved. I stepped away from the window. The light in her bedroom went out. At the exact same moment, my bedroom light switched on by itself. And from across the street, I heard 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't sleep much after that. I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe someone had broken into the house across the street. Maybe the realtor was wrong. Maybe the previous owner still had access to it. And maybe the voice I'd heard outside my window wasn't actually a voice. That's what I told myself. But I couldn't explain one thing. How did she know my name? I stayed awake until almost 5 in the morning. Nothing else happened. When the sun finally came up, I checked the window. There was nothing outside. The street looked completely normal. The house across from mine looked abandoned again. The curtains were closed. The lawn was still overgrown. The front door was shut. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the entire thing. Then I noticed something on the outside of my bedroom window. A handprint. It was on the glass. Small, like the hand of a woman. I stood there staring at it. There was no way someone could have reached that window from outside. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. There wasn't a balcony. No tree. No ladder. Nothing. I wiped the print away and went downstairs. I decided not to tell Mike. I didn't want to sound paranoid after living there for less than a week. Instead, I went to work. By the time I got home that evening, I'd almost convinced myself to forget about it. Almost. Then I saw the house. The upstairs bedroom curtain was slightly open. I stopped my car in the driveway. I stared at the window. The curtain moved. Just a little. There was someone behind it. I couldn't see her face, but I knew she was there. I got out of the car. The curtain immediately closed. I stood beside my driveway for several seconds. Then I noticed something on the sidewalk. A small object lying near the curb. I walked over and picked it up. It was an old photograph. The edges were yellow and damaged from water. There were several people standing in front of the house across the street. Family, a man, a woman, and a little girl. I turned the photograph over. There was writing on the back. June 14th, 2014. I looked at the house, then at the photograph. 11 years ago, exactly what Mike had said. I slipped the photograph into my pocket. That night, I searched online for the address. There wasn't much information. The house had been listed for sale several times. Each listing had been removed. No explanation. Eventually, I found an old local newspaper article. The headline made my stomach tighten. Local woman missing after husband's death. I opened it. The article was dated June 2015. The woman in the photograph had a name, Laura Bennett. She had lived in the house with her husband and daughter. Her husband had died suddenly in 2014. 1 year later, Laura disappeared. Her daughter had already been living with relatives. Police searched the property. Nothing was found. No body, no evidence, no explanation. The article ended with a sentence that bothered me more than anything else. Investigators have not ruled out the possibility that Laura left voluntarily. I read it twice. Then I looked at the photograph again. The little girl was standing beside her mother. Laura's hand was resting on the girl's shoulder. But something caught my attention. Behind them, in the upstairs window, there was a person. I zoomed in. The image became blurry. I couldn't make out the face. But the person was standing in exactly the same bedroom where I'd seen the woman the previous night. I stared at the photograph for a long time. Then my phone suddenly rang. It was Mike. I answered. "Hello." He didn't say anything. "Mike." Finally, he spoke. "Where did you get that photograph?" I looked at it. Found it near my driveway. There was a long silence. Then he asked, "Did you see the girl?" "What girl?" "The little girl in the photograph." I frowned. "Yeah." Mike's voice became quieter. "That's not Laura's daughter." I felt a chill. "What?" "Laura's daughter was never in that photograph." I looked down. The little girl was still there. Mike continued. "Daniel." "Yeah." "Don't keep that photograph." I laughed nervously. "Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Burn it." The call ended. I stared at my phone, then at the photograph. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt like someone was watching me. I slowly looked toward my bedroom window. The curtains were closed. I walked upstairs. I opened them. The house across the street was completely dark. Then, the upstairs light turned on. 2:13 a.m. I checked the clock. I hadn't realized how much time had passed. The curtain across the street slowly moved. The same woman appeared. This time, she wasn't standing by the window. She was sitting on the floor, facing me. Her head was tilted slightly to one side. Then she lifted her hand and pointed directly at me. I stepped away from the window. My phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number. I opened it. There were only 4 words. "You found my picture." I stared at the message. Then another one appeared. "Now find my daughter." I didn't reply to the message. I just stood there staring at my phone. "You found my picture." Then, "Now find my daughter." I read the messages several times, hoping there was some explanation I was missing. Maybe someone was playing a joke. Maybe one of the neighbors had found the photograph and was messing with me. But there was one problem. Nobody knew I had it. I hadn't posted it anywhere. I hadn't even told Mike that I was still holding on to it. I looked across the street again. The upstairs window was still lit. The woman was gone. I waited. Nothing moved behind the curtain. I finally closed the curtains and went downstairs. I put the photograph on the kitchen counter. For some reason, I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Instead, I decided to search for Laura's daughter. If there really was a girl in that photograph, I wanted to know who she was. I opened my laptop and searched Laura Bennett's name. There wasn't much. The old newspaper article mentioned that her daughter had been sent to live with relatives after her father's death. But the girl's name wasn't included. I tried searching the address. Nothing. I searched the husband's name. Still nothing. Then I found an old property record. The house had belonged to Michael Bennett. His wife was listed as Laura, but there was no child listed anywhere. That made no sense. I opened another archive. This one contained old-school records. I searched the neighborhood. Then I found something. A girl had attended an elementary school less than a mile from the house. Her name was Emma Bennett. I stared at the screen. Emma. That had to be her. I searched the name. The record showed she had attended the school until 2014. Then suddenly, nothing. No transfer record. No new school. No graduation. Nothing. It was as if she had simply disappeared from the system. I checked the date. October 2014. 3 months after the photograph had been taken. I leaned back in my chair. Something wasn't right. I picked up the photograph again. This time, I looked carefully at the little girl. She looked about 8 or 9 years old. Brown hair, blue sweater, small silver necklace. Then I noticed something I'd missed before. She wasn't smiling. Everyone else in the photograph was. The father, Laura, even the dog sitting near the porch. But Emma was staring directly at the camera with a completely blank expression, and her right hand was pointing toward the upstairs window, the exact same window where I'd seen the woman. I felt a cold sensation move through my stomach. I zoomed in on the window. The person standing there wasn't Laura. It was the little girl, Emma. I was staring at the photograph when someone knocked on my front door. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. I nearly fell out of my chair. I didn't move. Another knock. I looked through the security camera. Nobody was standing outside. I waited. Then my phone vibrated. Another message. Don't open it. I stared at the front door. Then another message arrived. She isn't outside. I slowly turned around. The kitchen was empty. The hallway was dark. Then I heard a child's voice behind me, very softly. Mr. Daniel? I froze. The voice came from upstairs. A little girl's voice. Mr. Daniel? I didn't answer. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter. The voice came again. I found you. I slowly walked toward the stairs. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the top, my bedroom door was open. I knew I'd closed it. I shined the flashlight inside. Nothing. Then I heard a small sound. A child's humming. Coming from my bedroom. I stepped inside. The window was open. The curtains were moving in the cold air. And sitting on the floor beside my bed was the photograph. I hadn't brought it upstairs. I slowly approached it. There was something written across the girl's face. Not printed. Written with what looked like black ink. For words. She is not my MOM. I stared at the sentence. Then I heard something outside. I looked through the window. The woman was standing across the street. But this time, she wasn't looking at me. She was looking toward the ground. I followed her gaze. There was someone standing on the sidewalk. A little girl. Blue sweater. Brown hair. Silver necklace. Emma. She slowly looked up at my bedroom window. Then she raised one finger to her lips. Don't speak. The woman across the street suddenly turned around. She looked directly at the girl. Emma ran. The woman disappeared from the window. I watched Emma run into the darkness between the houses. Then my bedroom door slammed shut behind me. I turned around. My phone was lying on the bed. The screen was already open. A new message appeared. She saw you. Then another. Now she's coming for you. I stood completely still. And from downstairs, I heard the front door slowly unlock. The front door unlocked by itself. I heard the deadbolt slide back. Click. Then the handle moved. I stood in my bedroom doorway, holding the flashlight so tightly that my hands started to hurt. I didn't move. The house was silent. Then the front door slowly opened. I could hear the hinges creaking from upstairs. Creak. A cold draft moved through the hallway. I wanted to believe it was the wind, but I'd locked the door myself when I came home, and the deadbolt couldn't unlock itself. I slowly started down the stairs. One step, then another. I stopped halfway. Someone was standing inside the house. I could only see the top of their head from where I was standing. A child. Small. Still. Facing away from me. I whispered, "Emma." The figure didn't move. I took another step. The floorboard creaked. The child slowly turned around. It wasn't Emma. It was a little boy I'd never seen before. He looked about 7 years old. His clothes were old-fashioned. A gray sweater, dark pants, bare feet. He stared at me with completely empty eyes. Then he whispered, "She's looking for you." I couldn't speak. The boy pointed toward the front door. I looked. Nobody was there. When I turned back, the boy was gone. I ran downstairs. The front door was still open. I slammed it shut and locked everything. Deadbolt, chain, handle lock. I checked them twice. Then I stood there breathing heavily. My phone vibrated. I already knew what the message would say. I looked. "You shouldn't have spoken to him." Another message appeared. "He isn't supposed to be there anymore." I stared at the screen. Then I heard something upstairs. A child's footsteps, running across the hallway. I grabbed my phone and called Mike. He answered after several rings. "Hello, Mike. I need you to come over." Silence. "What's wrong?" Someone was inside my house. His voice immediately changed. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Did you see them?" "A kid." Mike didn't say anything. I continued. "He said someone was looking for me." Another long silence. Then Mike asked, "Was he wearing a gray sweater?" My stomach dropped. "How do you know?" Mike took a breath. "Because I've seen him before." I looked upstairs. "Who is he?" Mike didn't answer. "Mike!" Finally, he whispered, "Don't go upstairs." "Why?" "Just don't." Then the call ended. I stood in the hallway. I could hear footsteps above me. Slow. Bare feet against the wooden floor. Step, step, step. Then they stopped directly above me. I looked at the ceiling. Something scratched the floor. 3 slow scratches. Then silence. I didn't go upstairs. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and locked myself inside. I waited. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Nothing happened. Eventually, I heard a car pull into the driveway. He came through the back door. The first thing he said was, Where's the photograph? I pointed toward the stairs. It's upstairs. He looked at me. You brought it upstairs? No, it moved. His face went pale. What do you mean it moved? I left it on the kitchen counter. Mike slowly shook his head. Daniel, what? That photograph has never been in your house. I stared at him. What? He looked toward the staircase. It belonged to Laura. You said nobody lived there. I said nobody lives there now. Then tell me what happened. Mike sat down. For several seconds, he didn't speak. Then he said, Laura wasn't the first person who disappeared from that house. I felt my stomach tighten. Who was the first? He looked at me. Her son. I remembered the little boy. The kid in the gray sweater? Mike nodded. His name was Michael. I stared at him. Laura had a son? Yes. But the records. The records were changed. By who? Mike looked toward the windows. I don't know. Then he lowered his voice. But I remember what happened. He told me that 11 years ago, Michael Bennett had disappeared from the house. He was 7 years old. Police searched for him for weeks. Nothing. No body. No evidence. No footprints. No ransom. Nothing. Then 1 year later, Laura's husband died. And after another year, Laura disappeared. I looked at Mike. What about Emma? He looked confused. Who? Emma Bennett. Mike stared at me, then slowly shook his head. There was never an Emma. I felt the room become colder. I saw her. Mike didn't respond. I saw her across the street. He looked at me. Daniel. His voice was almost a whisper. Whoever you saw wasn't Emma. I remembered the photograph. The little girl. The sentence written across her face. She is not my MOM. I pulled out my phone and showed Mike the photograph. He stared at it. His face changed. What? He pointed at the little girl. That's Michael. I stared at him. No. Look at the face. I did. The hair. The clothes. The small silver necklace. The eyes. It was the same child. The child I'd seen inside my house. The child I'd seen in the photograph. But Mike was saying it was a boy. I looked at him. Then who was the girl I saw? Mike didn't answer. The house suddenly went silent. Every light in the kitchen flickered. Once, twice, then went out. My phone screen was the only light remaining. A message appeared. She's here. Mike grabbed my arm. Don't move. We listened. From upstairs, someone began humming. A child's melody. Slowly, softly. Then a woman's voice joined it. Two voices. One child. One woman. Singing the same song. Mike whispered, That's impossible. I looked at him. What? He was staring toward the ceiling. That's the song Laura used to sing to Michael. The humming stopped. Then a child's voice came from directly above us. Mommy? A woman's voice answered. I'm here. Mike's hand tightened around my arm. Then the child's voice whispered. He's here too. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Then another. Someone was walking toward the staircase. Mike looked at me. Whatever you do. He swallowed. Don't let them see you. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. And slowly, a shadow appeared on the wall. But there was something wrong with it. It wasn't the shadow of one person. It was the shadow of two people holding hands. The shadow stopped at the top of the stairs. Mike and I stood completely still. Neither of us breathed. The two shadows on the wall remained motionless. Two people, holding hands. Then one of them slowly raised its arm. The shadow pointed directly at us. Mike whispered, Don't look upstairs. I didn't, but I could hear footsteps. One pair, then another. They were coming down the stairs. Step, step, step. I gripped the flashlight. Mike grabbed my wrist. Not yet. What do you mean? Wait. The footsteps stopped. A child's voice came from the darkness. Mr. Daniel? My heart started pounding. It was the same voice I'd heard earlier. Michael. Then the woman's voice answered. Don't scare him. The child giggled. Then the lights came back on. The staircase was empty. Mike immediately released my arm. Stay here. Where are you going? Upstairs. I stared at him. You just told me not to go up there. I'm not you. He walked toward the stairs. I followed. He stopped. Daniel. What? If you hear someone calling your name. He looked directly at me. Don't answer. Then he went upstairs. I waited for a few seconds, then followed. The second floor looked completely normal. My bedroom door was open. The hallway was empty. Mike walked directly toward the room at the end. The room across from mine. I had never opened that door. It was supposed to be a storage room. Mike stood in front of it. That's where he disappeared. Michael! Mike nodded. I looked at the door. There was a small scratch near the handle. Then another, and another, like someone had been trying to get out. Mike unlocked it. The door opened. Inside was a child's bedroom. Old wallpaper, a small wooden bed, a bookshelf, several toys, everything covered in dust. I stepped inside. There was a toy train sitting on the floor. I remembered seeing it in the photograph. Mike walked toward the bed. He pointed at the wall. There were hundreds of small lines carved into the wallpaper. Groups of 5, one after another. I stared. What are those? Mike said. Days. I looked at him. Michael carved them. Why? He was counting. Counting what? Mike didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the wall beside the bed. There was one final line, but underneath it, someone had written a date. June 14th, 2015. The exact date Laura disappeared. I stepped closer. Then I noticed something beneath the date. A sentence, written in a child's handwriting. Mommy said she would come back when the house was full again. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Mike shook his head. I don't know. Then the toy train on the floor suddenly started moving. Neither of us touched it. It rolled slowly across the room, straight toward the closet. It stopped. The closet door opened by itself. Inside was darkness. Then we heard a child's voice. Mr. Daniel? I froze. Mike grabbed my shoulder. Don't answer. The voice came again. I know you're there. I stared at the closet. Then something rolled out. A small red ball. It stopped at my feet. I looked down. Written across it in black marker were 2 words. Look up. I slowly raised my head. There was a child standing on the ceiling, upside down. Bare feet pressed against the plaster. Gray sweater. Dark pants. It was Michael. His head was tilted toward us. He smiled, but his mouth didn't move when he spoke. She found you. Mike pulled me backward. The lights went out. Something dropped from the ceiling. We heard a loud impact. Then silence. When the lights came back, Michael was gone. But the closet door was wide open. Mike rushed toward it. Daniel, get out. I didn't move. There was something inside the closet. A wooden box. Mike pulled it out. It was old. Locked. He smashed the lock with a metal object. Inside were dozens of photographs. I picked up the first one. Michael. The second. Laura. The third. The house. The fourth was me. I dropped it. Mike stared at me. That's impossible. The photograph was recent. I was standing in front of my house, taken from across the street. I turned it over. There was a date written on the back. 3 days before I moved in. Mike looked at the next photograph. His face went pale. It was him, standing outside the same house. But the date was 11 years earlier. Then another photograph. Someone else. Another year. Another person. Different people. Different years. But always the same house. Always someone standing across the street. Watching. I finally understood. This house. I whispered. It's been watching people. Mike shook his head. No. He picked up the last photograph. His hands were trembling. This isn't the house. I looked at him. Then what is it? Mike turned the photograph around. It showed the abandoned house. But behind the upstairs window stood the woman. And beside her was a little boy, Michael. Mike whispered, "The house isn't haunted." He looked at me. "Someone is using it." Before I could ask who, we heard a door slam downstairs. then another, then another. Every door in the house began closing one after another. Bang, bang, bang. Mike grabbed the box. "We're leaving." We ran toward the stairs. But when we reached the hallway, my bedroom door was closed. I knew I'd left it open. Mike stopped. "Don't open that." From inside my bedroom, my own voice whispered, "Mike!" He looked at me. I shook my head. The voice came again. "Mike, it's Daniel." Mike stepped backward. Then the voice changed. It became Laura's. "Michael!" A child's voice answered from inside. "Mommy!" Mike's face went completely white, because from inside my bedroom, a woman began crying. And then she whispered, "He's been waiting for you." We didn't open my bedroom door. Neither of us moved. The voice inside continued to cry, softly, almost like someone trying not to be heard. Mike grabbed my arm. "Daniel, we need to leave." I nodded. We turned toward the stairs. Then the crying stopped. Completely. A few seconds passed. Then my bedroom door opened. Slowly. I looked back. The room was empty. The curtains were moving even though the window was closed. Mike whispered, "Don't look inside." But I already had. Something was lying on my bed. A photograph. I walked closer. Mike followed reluctantly. The photograph showed the abandoned house across the street. But this time, the upstairs window was visible. Someone was standing behind it. I looked closer. It was me, standing inside that bedroom. I turned the photograph over. There was writing on the back. "You've already been here." My stomach dropped. "No." Mike took the photograph from my hand. His face changed. "Daniel." "What?" "This photograph was taken 11 years ago." I stared at him. "That's impossible." He pointed toward the date. June 14th, 2014. I looked at the person in the window again. It looked like me. Same face, same height, same clothes I was wearing now. Mike whispered, "Maybe that's not you." "Then who is it?" He didn't answer. A sound came from downstairs. Something heavy hitting the floor. Bang. We both froze. Then another. Bang. Mike grabbed the box of photographs. "We're leaving." We ran downstairs. The front door was still locked. Mike tried the handle. Nothing. He pulled harder. Still nothing. Then I noticed the kitchen window. It was open. We climbed through it and ran into the backyard. The moment we stepped outside, the front door of the house opened by itself. We looked back. Someone was standing inside. A woman. Laura. She was staring directly at us. Then she slowly lifted her hand, pointing across the street, at her house. I looked. The upstairs bedroom light was on. Mike whispered, "Don't go there." I turned toward him. "Why?" He stared at the house. "Because that's where she wants you." Then we heard a child's voice behind us. "Mr. Daniel." I turned. Michael was standing beside the fence. Gray sweater, bare feet. His face was completely expressionless. He pointed toward the abandoned house. Then he said, "She isn't my mother." The upstairs light went out. Every window in the house went dark. Michael disappeared. Mike grabbed my shoulder. "Get inside." We went back into my house. He locked every door. Then he looked at me. "You can't stay here." "Why?" "Because she knows where you live now." I looked toward the window. "Who is she?" Mike hesitated. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Laura isn't the woman you're seeing." I stared at him. "What?" "Laura disappeared 11 years ago." He looked toward the abandoned house. "Whatever is in there." He swallowed. "It learned how to look like her." I remembered the woman at the window, the messages, the photograph, the child. And suddenly I understood something. The thing in that house wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to make me remember something. Something that happened before I ever moved into the neighborhood. Mike looked at the clock. 2:11 a.m. Then my phone vibrated. A message appeared. 6 minutes. Another message arrived immediately. "Then you'll remember." Mike read the screen. His face went pale. "Daniel." "What?" He pointed toward the window. The upstairs light in the abandoned house had turned on again. But this time, someone was standing behind the curtain. Not Laura, not Michael, not Emma. It was me, and the person standing in the window was smiling, couldn't look away. The person standing in the upstairs window of the abandoned house looked exactly like me. Same face, same hair, same dark t-shirt. Even the small scar above my eyebrow was there. Mike stood beside me, staring at the window. "Daniel, I see him." The figure smiled. Then it raised its hand and waved. I didn't wave back. The figure slowly stepped away from the window. For a moment, I thought it was gone. Then it came back. But this time, it wasn't standing behind the curtain. It was standing directly against the glass. Its face was pressed against the window, watching us. Mike grabbed the curtains and closed them. "Don't look." I turned toward him. "What is happening?" He didn't answer. "Mike," he looked at me. "You need to leave this house." "I'm not leaving." "You don't understand." "Then explain it." He stared at me for several seconds. Finally, he sat down. "There was another family here before Laura." I frowned. "What?" "The house across the street wasn't always empty." He looked toward the window. "Before the Bennetts, a man named Thomas Reed lived there." "When?" 2011. "Only 3 years?" "2. Mike rubbed his face. "Thomas disappeared too." I stared at him. "How many people have disappeared from that house?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, 7. I felt a cold sensation run through my body. 7? 7 people. All disappeared? Not all. He looked at me. Some came back. My stomach tightened. What happened to them? Mike lowered his voice. They weren't the same. I waited. He continued. 1 woman came back after missing for 6 days. She walked into her house, sat at the kitchen table and refused to speak. What happened? She died 2 days later. Why? Mike shook his head. Nobody knows. What about the others? 1 walked into traffic. Another disappeared again. And the rest? Mike looked toward the floor. 3 of them never spoke a word again. I stared at him. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because people stopped talking about the house. Why? Because every time someone tried. He stopped. What? Mike looked at me. Something happened to them. The room became quiet. Then my phone vibrated. A new message. I opened it. Ask Mike about the basement. I slowly looked at him. What's in the basement? Mike didn't move. His expression changed immediately. What did you just say? I showed him the message. He stared at the screen, then whispered, Nobody knows about the basement. I looked toward the abandoned house. Apparently someone does. Mike stood up. You're not going there. I need answers. No. Why? Because that's where Thomas found it. What? Mike grabbed his jacket. The basement. He started walking toward the door. Where are you going? Home. You can't just leave. He stopped, then turned around. Daniel. His voice was different, almost frightened. Whatever you do tonight. He pointed toward the abandoned house. Don't go inside. Then he left. I locked the door behind him. For the next 20 minutes, I stayed downstairs. I didn't look outside. I didn't check the windows. I didn't even look at my phone. I just sat there, trying to calm myself down. Then, I heard something from upstairs. A child's voice. Mr. Daniel? I closed my eyes. Not again. Mr. Daniel? I didn't answer. Then the voice whispered. You said you'd come back. My eyes opened. I had never said that. At least, I didn't remember saying it. Then the lights went out. The entire house became dark. I reached for my phone. The flashlight turned on. Something was standing at the top of the stairs. A little boy. Gray sweater. Bare feet. Michael. He looked directly at me. I whispered, Who are you? He pointed toward my front door, then said, She wants you to come home. I frowned. This is my home. Michael shook his head. Slowly. No. He pointed across the street. That's your home. Then he disappeared. I stood there completely frozen. A few seconds later, someone knocked on my front door. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. I walked toward it. I looked through the peephole. Nobody. Then I heard a woman's voice outside. Laura. Daniel. I didn't answer. Please open the door. I stepped backward. Then she whispered, Your mother is waiting for you. My blood ran cold. My mother had been dead for 8 years. The voice outside changed. It became my mother's voice. Daniel. Covered my mouth. It's me. I started crying. Not because I believed it, because it knew exactly what to say. The voice continued, You promised you'd come back. I looked toward the window. Across the street, the upstairs light turned on, and standing behind it was me, the other Daniel. He was holding something in his hand, a photograph. Then he lifted it against the glass. I couldn't see the image clearly, but I could read the writing on the back. For words, You have been here before. The front door handle slowly began turning, and my mother's voice whispered, Come home, Daniel. The front door handle kept turning, slowly, like whoever was outside knew I was standing there. I didn't move. My mother's voice came through the door again. Daniel, open the door. I closed my eyes. My mother had been dead for 8 years. Whatever was outside wasn't her. I backed away from the door. Then the handle stopped. Silence. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. Then my phone vibrated. A message appeared. Don't look through the window. I stared at it. Another message appeared. He's waiting for you. I knew exactly who it meant. The other Daniel. I looked toward the stairs. The little boy was gone. I grabbed my jacket. If the house across the street really contained answers, I was done waiting for them to come to me. I was going there. The street was completely empty. No cars. No porch lights. No neighbors. Just the sound of wind moving through the trees. I crossed the road. The abandoned house looked different up close. Much bigger. The paint was peeling from the siding. The front porch sagged beneath my weight. I stood in front of the door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Dust, old wood, and something damp underneath. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. I immediately turned around. The handle wouldn't move. I pulled harder. Nothing. Then I heard a sound upstairs. A child laughing. I looked toward the staircase. I didn't go up. Instead, I noticed something near the kitchen. A basement door. I remembered Mike's warning. That's where Thomas found it. I opened the door. A staircase descended into darkness. I turned on my flashlight. The walls were covered with old photographs. Some were badly damaged. Others looked almost new. I walked down. At the bottom was a small room. There was an old wooden desk, a chair, a cassette recorder, and dozens of handwritten notebooks. I picked up the first one. The name on the cover was Thomas Reed, 2011. I opened it. The first pages were ordinary. Thomas described hearing footsteps upstairs, then seeing lights in rooms he knew were empty. Then he mentioned the woman. I kept reading. One sentence made me stop. She doesn't live in the house. The next page. The house is only where she appears. Another. She needs someone to remember her. I turned the page. There was a drawing. A woman standing beside a little boy. Underneath it, Laura and Michael. I stared at it. Then I found something else. A photograph. Thomas standing in the basement. The photograph had been taken from behind him. Someone else had taken it. I turned it over. There was a date. June 14th, 2011. 4 years before Laura disappeared. Then I noticed something in the background. A mirror. And inside the mirror, I could see myself. I dropped the photograph. My flashlight flickered. Then the cassette recorder turned on. By itself. Static filled the room. Then a man's voice. Thomas, if you're hearing this. He paused. You've already seen her. I stood completely still. The recording continued. She doesn't want you dead. Static. She wants you to remember. I felt my throat tighten. Thomas continued. The people who disappear aren't victims. A long pause. "They're witnesses." The tape clicked. Then his voice became quieter. "If she shows you someone you love." Another pause. "Don't believe them." I looked toward the staircase. I could hear footsteps above me. Thomas's voice continued. "Because the thing wearing their face." The tape distorted. "Isn't the thing you should be afraid of." I frowned. "What?" The tape suddenly became clear. Thomas whispered, "The person standing beside you is." I froze. My flashlight slowly moved downward. I hadn't noticed it before. There were two shadows on the basement wall. Mine and another. Someone was standing directly behind me. I turned around. Nobody. The second shadow remained. Then a child's voice whispered, "Mr. Daniel." I slowly looked toward the stairs. Michael was standing at the top. He pointed toward the cassette recorder. Then he shook his head. "No." He nodded, then pointed behind me. I turned. The cassette recorder was still playing, but now the voice coming from it was mine. "If you're hearing this." Couldn't breathe. My own voice continued, "You've already seen her." I looked at Michael. He was crying. Then he whispered, "You made the recording." The basement lights suddenly turned on. For the first time, I saw the walls clearly. They were covered with photographs. Hundreds of them. Thomas, Laura, Michael, other families, other strangers, and me. Photographs of me from different years. 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. Some were taken before I was even living in this state. I stepped closer. One photograph showed me standing beside Laura. Another showed me standing beside Michael. Another showed me standing inside room 317. And the last photograph was dated tomorrow. It showed me standing in this basement, exactly where I was standing now. But there was something else in the photograph. Someone was standing beside me. I slowly looked at the empty space next to me, then back at the photograph. The person in it was Laura. She had her hand on my shoulder. I felt a hand touch my shoulder. Cold fingers. I couldn't move. A woman's voice whispered directly beside my ear, "You finally came home." The hand on my shoulder was freezing. I didn't move. Couldn't. For several seconds, I just stood there staring at the photograph on the wall. The woman in the picture was standing exactly where I was standing now. Her hand rested on my shoulder, and someone had taken the photograph from directly in front of us. I slowly turned my head. There was nobody there, but the cold hand was still on my shoulder. Then a voice whispered, "Daniel." I closed my eyes. "Who are you?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, the cassette recorder clicked. The tape stopped. Then it started again. My voice came through the speaker. "If you're hearing this, you already know." I opened my eyes. The little boy was still standing at the top of the stairs. "Michael." He pointed toward the wall. I followed his finger. One of the photographs was different. It showed the abandoned house from across the street. But there was something strange about it. Every window was covered with curtains, except one. The upstairs bedroom. A person was standing there. Me. I looked at the date. June 14th, 2014. I shook my head. I wasn't here. Michael slowly shook his head too. Then he pointed at another photograph. Same house. June 14th, 2015. I was there again. Then another. June 14th, 2017. Again. Then June 14th, 2020. Again. Always me. Always standing in the upstairs window. I backed away. "What is this?" Michael didn't answer. He simply pointed toward the basement floor. There was a trapdoor beneath the desk. I hadn't noticed it before. I walked over and opened it. A narrow staircase descended even deeper. The air coming from below was ice cold. I looked at Michael. He shook his head. "Don't." He nodded, then pointed toward the stairs. He wanted me to go. I didn't understand, but I went. The staircase ended in a small concrete room. There was only one thing inside, a wooden chair, and someone sitting in it. My back went rigid. The person slowly lifted his head. It was me, not the version of me from the photographs. Not the reflection I'd seen upstairs. This version looked older, maybe 10 years older. His face was pale. His hair was longer. There were dark circles beneath his eyes, and his hands were tied to the chair. I stared at him. He stared back. Then he whispered, "You're finally here." I couldn't speak. He smiled weakly. "I know what you're going to ask." I swallowed. "Who are you?" He looked at me. "I'm you." "No." "Yes." "You can't be." He looked toward the wall. There was a mirror hanging there. I looked into it. My reflection was normal, but the man in the chair wasn't reflected at all. I turned back. He smiled. "That's because I'm not here." I didn't understand. He continued, "You're seeing the memory." "What memory?" "The first time you came here." I stared at him. "I've never been here." He laughed softly. "You say that every time." A cold feeling moved through my body. "Every time." He nodded. "Every time you forget." Then he leaned forward. His voice became quieter. "You've been coming here for 11 years. I shook my head. "No. You were here when Michael disappeared." My heart stopped. "You were here when Thomas disappeared." Couldn't breathe. "You were here when Laura disappeared." I stared at him. "No." He looked directly into my eyes. "And you were here when I disappeared." Silence. I looked at the mirror again. My reflection was standing alone. But slowly, another reflection appeared behind me. A woman. Laura. She placed her hand on my shoulder. The same position as the photograph. I turned around. Nobody. When I looked back into the mirror, she was still there. Then Michael appeared beside her. Then Thomas. Then dozens of other people. All staring at me. All dead silent. The man in the chair whispered, "They aren't trapped here." I looked at him. "Then where are they?" He smiled. "They're trapped in you." The lights went out. The mirror cracked. And from somewhere in the darkness, Laura whispered, "Daniel, you promised you'd come back." I heard footsteps. One person. Then another. Then dozens. They were coming closer. The man in the chair started screaming, "Don't let her touch you." I backed away. "Who?" He pointed into the darkness. "Laura." I turned. She was standing there, only a few feet away. Her face looked exactly like the woman I'd seen across the street. But now I could see her clearly. Her eyes were completely black. She smiled. Then she whispered, "You finally remembered." I couldn't move. She reached toward me, and just before her fingers touched my face, the basement door above us slammed shut. Michael screamed. The man in the chair shouted, "Run!" Then every light in the basement came on at once. The room was empty. The chair was empty. The man was gone. Michael was gone. Laura was gone. Only the cassette recorder remained. It was still playing. My own voice came through the speaker one last time. "If you ever remember the house." Pause. Then, "Don't go home." The tape clicked off. I stood alone in the basement, and for the first time, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know where home was anymore. I didn't know where home was anymore. I stood in the basement for what felt like several minutes, staring at the dead cassette recorder. Then I heard something above me, a door closing. I looked toward the staircase. The basement door was still shut. I walked up slowly. Every step creaked beneath my feet. When I reached the top, I pushed the door open. The hallway was dark. I turned on my flashlight. The house looked exactly as it had when I entered. Old furniture, dust-covered pictures, the same peeling wallpaper, but something was different. The front door was gone. I walked toward where it had been. There was only a wall. I touched it. Solid. No door. No handle. Nothing. I pulled out my phone. No signal. The time was still 2:13 a.m. I stared at the screen. It hadn't changed since I'd entered the house. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. I looked toward the staircase. Someone was walking slowly across the second floor. Step, step, step. I climbed the stairs. The hallway was empty. My bedroom was at the end. The door was open. I stepped inside. The room looked exactly like my bedroom at home. My bed, my desk, my laptop, even the jacket I'd left on the chair that morning. I stood there staring. Then I noticed the window. Across the street, there was my house, my actual house. I could see my bedroom window. The curtains were closed, and someone was standing inside. I raised my flashlight toward it. The person moved closer to the glass. It was me, again. But this time, he wasn't smiling. He was terrified. He started pounding on the window. I couldn't hear him. Then he pointed behind himself. I looked into my own bedroom. There was someone standing behind him. A woman, Laura. I stepped away from the window. No, my phone vibrated. A message appeared. Don't go back. Another. It's already inside. Then another. You brought it with you. I stared at the messages. Suddenly, I heard a sound behind me. A quiet laugh. I turned. Michael was standing in the doorway. He looked different now. His face wasn't expressionless anymore. He looked scared. He whispered, "Mr. Daniel." "What?" "You have to remember." "Remember what?" He pointed at the mirror. I looked. My reflection was standing there, but I wasn't moving. The reflection slowly raised its hand. Then it pointed toward the floor. I looked down. There was a photograph. I picked it up. It showed my house, my current house, but the date was June 14th, 2014. I turned it over. There was writing on the back. This is where it started. I looked at Michael. What happened here? He whispered, "You came looking for me." I shook my head. "I didn't know you." "You did." "When?" "Before you forgot." I stared at him. He continued, "You were a police officer." I froze. "No. You investigated my disappearance." I felt something crack inside my memory. A police station. A case file. A photograph of a missing boy. A house across the street. My own handwriting. I remembered sitting at a desk, reading the name, Michael Bennett. Then another memory. Walking into this house. Finding the basement. Hearing a child's voice. And then, Laura. I remembered her standing behind me. I remembered her touching my face. And I remembered making a deal. I whispered, "What did I promise?" Michael looked at me. "You promised to forget." My chest tightened. "Why?" "Because she couldn't leave." I looked toward the mirror. My reflection was no longer alone. Laura was standing behind it. She placed both hands on my shoulders. Then she whispered, "You promised you'd forget me." The mirror suddenly shattered. Every piece fell to the floor, but none of the pieces showed my reflection. They showed different versions of me. A police officer, a younger man, an older man, a child, all standing inside the same house, all staring at me. Then one final piece of glass showed something different. It showed my bedroom at home. Sarah was standing inside. I didn't understand. Sarah, my neighbor? No, I suddenly remembered. She wasn't my neighbor. She was the realtor, the woman who sold me the house, the woman who had warned me about the abandoned house, the woman who had told me nobody lived there. She had known. She had always known. I grabbed my phone. There was one final message. "Ask her why she chose you." Then another. "She has been waiting for 11 years. I felt the blood drain from my face. The house across the street hadn't been waiting for me. Laura hadn't been waiting for me. Michael hadn't been waiting for me. Someone had deliberately brought me here. I walked toward the staircase. Michael followed. "Where are you going?" I looked at him. "Home." He shook his head. "You can't." "Why?" He pointed toward the front door. It was there now, standing open. Beyond it was my neighborhood, my street, my house. Everything looked normal. But standing in front of my house was the woman who had sold it to me, Sarah. She was staring directly at me, and beside her stood Laura. Sarah smiled. Then she raised her hand, not waving, inviting me. Michael grabbed my arm. "Don't go." I looked at him. "Why?" He whispered. "Because she's the reason you came back." I didn't listen to Michael. I stepped toward the open door. He grabbed my arm. "Daniel, please." I looked back at him. He was crying. "You don't understand," he whispered. If you go through that door, you won't remember me again. I stared at him. Maybe that's the point. He shook his head. No. Then he said something that stopped me. You forgot me once already. I froze. What? Michael looked toward the woman standing outside. 11 years ago, my memories started coming back. Not all at once, just fragments. A police badge, a case file, a photograph of Michael, a missing person report, then Laura, then Sarah, the realtor. I remembered meeting her long before I bought the house. Not as a realtor, as a witness. She had been the last person to see Laura alive, and she'd told me something I had completely forgotten. Whatever you see inside that house, don't believe it. I looked toward Sarah. She was still standing across the street, but now, she wasn't smiling. Laura was beside her. Sarah whispered something into Laura's ear. Laura looked at me, then she smiled. Michael pulled me backward. She's not Laura. I know. No. He shook his head. She's not the thing you think she is. I stared at him. What is she? Michael looked toward the house. She's the first one. The woman standing beside Sarah slowly turned her head. Her face changed. For a moment I saw Laura, then Thomas, then Michael, then my mother, then myself. Every person I'd seen in the photographs, every person who had disappeared, all of them were inside her. I finally understood why the photographs kept showing different people. She wasn't haunting them. She was collecting them. Their memories, their voices, their faces. And somehow, mine had been connected to her for 11 years. Sarah stepped forward. Daniel. Her voice echoed through the empty street. You promised. I looked at her. What did I promise? She smiled. To come back. I shook my head. I never promised you anything. Sarah's smile disappeared. Then Michael whispered, Yes, you did. I looked at him. He pointed toward my pocket. The photograph. I reached inside. There was one photograph I hadn't noticed before. Pulled it out. It showed me standing in front of the abandoned house. Beside me was Sarah, and between us was Laura. On the back was a date, June 14th, 2015. I turned the photograph over. There was one sentence. One of us has to stay. I remembered everything. Laura hadn't disappeared. She had stayed. Thomas hadn't disappeared. He had stayed. Michael hadn't disappeared. He had stayed. They had all remained inside the house to keep the thing trapped. And I had been the one who was supposed to replace them. But I had broken the agreement. I had forgotten. I had moved away. I had built another life. And 11 years later, I had unknowingly returned. Sarah looked at me. You were supposed to stay. I shook my head. No. She smiled. You already did. I looked around. The street was gone. The houses were gone. There was only darkness. The abandoned house stood alone. Its upstairs light was glowing. Then I realized something. I wasn't standing outside anymore. I was standing in the upstairs bedroom. Room 317. Michael was beside me. Laura was behind him. Thomas stood near the window. And Sarah was standing in the doorway. She closed it. Click. I ran toward her. The door wouldn't open. Sarah. She stared at me through the glass. I'm sorry. Then she walked away. I looked at Michael. What do I do? He smiled sadly. You stay. No. You have to. I won't. He pointed toward the window. I looked outside. My house was across the street. My bedroom light was on. Someone was standing inside. Me. Watching. I suddenly realized what was happening. The version of me inside my house wasn't another version. It was the life I had left behind. Everything I remembered, everything I thought was real, it was already gone. I looked back at Michael. Can I get out? He nodded. There is one way. How? Forget. I stared at him. Forget what? Everything. I looked at Laura. She was crying. Then Thomas. He lowered his head. Finally, Michael stepped closer. If you remember us. He touched my hand. You stay. The room became silent. I looked at the door, then at the window. then at the people around me. I closed my eyes and started forgetting. First, the house, then the photographs, then room 317, then Laura, then Michael, then Thomas, then Sarah. Finally, I forgot my own name. Everything became dark. I woke up in my bedroom. Morning sunlight filled the room. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered. I had moved into the neighborhood 3 weeks ago. I had unpacked my boxes. I had started a new job. Everything was normal. I walked downstairs, made coffee, opened the front door. The street looked peaceful. Then I noticed the house across from mine. It was empty, just like the realtor had said. I smiled. Maybe I'd been imagining things. Maybe I'd been stressed. Maybe the whole thing had been a nightmare. I went back inside. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I opened it. There was no text, just a photograph. I stared at it. It showed my bedroom, taken from across the street. I was standing beside the window, and behind me stood a little boy wearing a gray sweater. I dropped the phone. Then another message arrived. You forgot us. Another. But we didn't forget you. I slowly looked toward the window. The upstairs bedroom of the abandoned house was dark. Then the light turned on. 2:13 a.m. I checked the clock. It was exactly 2:13 a.m. A figure appeared behind the curtain. A woman. She raised one hand and waved. Then someone knocked on my bedroom window 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't move. I didn't answer, because somewhere deep inside me, I already knew who was standing outside. And the worst part? I couldn't remember why I was afraid of her.